From the very first moment he slumped back on that velvet couch, eyes half closed and breathing steady, billionaire Alexander Crown believed he was in complete control. He thought he knew people, employees, partners, strangers who smiled at him only for what he could give. He thought he knew loyalty, kindness, honesty. He thought he could predict the reactions of anyone when faced with temptation. But what he did not know, what he could never have imagined, was that a single small girl, with dirt on her sleeves and worry hidden behind her quiet eyes, would shatter every belief he held about the world and about himself. Before we go deeper, if you believe the world needs more kindness, empathy, and second chances, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps stories like this reach more hearts. Alexander Crown was a man feared for his intelligence, admired for his wealth, and envied for the empire he built from nothing. But success had hardened him. Betrayals through the years carved deep lines of distrust across his heart, each one teaching him the same lesson: never believe anyone's kindness is real. He had reached a point where loyalty felt like a rare currency, one most people couldn't afford. So when rumors reached him that his newly hired maid, Clara, might be taking advantage of his generosity by bringing her young daughter with her during late shifts, he didn't react with compassion. He reacted like a man who'd been burned too many times. He devised a test, harsh, unfair, but in his mind, necessary. He scattered stacks of cash on the marble coffee table in his private study, an absurd amount for most people, but merely a small fraction of his fortune. Then he called Clara in to tidy the room while he pretended to fall asleep on the couch. He knew her daughter, Lily, accompanied her that day because the girl's daycare was closed. Alexander told himself this wasn't cruelty, it was clarity. If the child even touched the money, he would know the truth, that no matter the age or innocence, humans couldn't resist their real nature. Clara knocked softly before entering, tired but polite as always. Her daughter stood quietly beside her, a little girl no more than 6, with a faded dress and timid posture that showed she understood more about hardship than any child ever should. Clara gently set her to sit on a small chair near the wall with a whispered reminder to behave. It was clear she didn't want to trouble anyone, not even the men pretending to sleep just a few feet away. As Clara dusted bookshelves and polished the desk, Lily's gaze drifted toward the mountain of money on the table. Alexander kept his breathing slow and even, but behind his closed lids he watched everything with calculated sharpness. He expected the telltale signs of temptation, the hesitant glance, the creeping hand, the guilt disguised as curiosity. Instead, he saw something else entirely. The little girl didn't reach for the money at first. She stared at it with the kind of longing that pierced deeply, the kind that only exists in a child who has gone to bed hungry more times than she could count, who has seen her mother cry quietly in the kitchen over unpaid bills, who has learned that some wishes are too expensive to even whisper. Alexander waited. He knew desire. He knew the human mind always found a way to justify what the heart wanted. But Lily didn't move until she noticed something else. Alexander's tie, skewed awkwardly under his chin, as though he had fallen asleep while still exhausted from work. Her brow furrowed not with greed but with concern. She slowly slid off her chair, walked softly to the couch, and stood before him with hesitant patience. Instead of touching the cash, she ignored it completely. She reached toward him with the tiniest hand, not to steal but to fix his crooked tie. Alexander felt the faint brush of her fingers and nearly broke character. She wasn't interested in the money at all. She was focused entirely on making sure he looked comfortable, maybe even respectable, as if she believed sleeping in a messy tie was a serious problem. She even pulled the blanket on the nearby chair and draped it carefully over him, the gesture so gentle and filled with childlike sincerity that it stunned the billionaire to his core. When she finally turned back toward her mother, her eyes fell again on the pile of dollar bills. This was the moment Alexander had expected, the turning point where innocence would slip into temptation. She stepped closer. He felt a tightness in his chest. This was it. This was human nature revealing itself. But Lily didn't take the money. She picked up one single bill, not to keep, not to hide, but because it had slipped off the polished table and fallen to the floor. She looked around, found a paperweight shaped like a glass globe, and placed it carefully on top of the stray bill so it wouldn't blow away from the drafty window. Then she stepped back, satisfied that she had fixed something important. In that instant, the billionaire's heart cracked open in ways he didn't even know were possible. When Clara finally called Lily to go, the child hesitated. She turned one last time toward Alexander, still pretending to sleep, and softly whispered something only he heard. I hope you're having a nice dream." A moment later, the door closed behind them, and Alexander sat up, breath shaking in his chest. The test meant to expose dishonesty had instead exposed his own blindness. He had expected selfishness and instead found purity. He had anticipated greed and instead discovered compassion. He had tried to judge a child, and all he found was his own coldness staring back at him. That night, he couldn't sleep. He kept seeing Lily's tiny hand fixing his tie, her instinctive desire to care for someone she didn't even know, simply because she saw something that needed kindness. He thought about Clara too, how she carried exhaustion in her every step, how she smiled politely despite the weight she bore, how she never once complained or asked for more. For years, Alexander had believed generosity only bred dependence and deception. But now he realized something much deeper: sometimes the people with the least to offer materially were the ones richest in heart. The next morning, he called Clara into his office, not sternly, but gently. And although the story isn't about dialogue, what happened in that room changed both their lives. He apologized, not in the clipped, cold way billionaires often did, but sincerely, emotionally. Clara was confused at first, thinking she had done something wrong, but when Alexander explained what he had witnessed, how her daughter had acted with more integrity than many adults he'd trusted, tears filled her eyes. He asked about their life, their struggles, and for the first time he listened without judgment. She explained the hardship of raising a child alone, the sacrifices she made daily, the dreams she had buried because survival took priority. Alexander didn't interrupt. He felt something unfamiliar swelling in his chest: responsibility, compassion, maybe even the first flicker of redemption. He offered her a promotion first, a fair one, not charity, a position managing household affairs with better pay and stability. Then, more importantly, he promised to cover Lily's education, every step from primary school to university if she wished. Clara broke down, unable to speak, overwhelmed by a kindness she had never expected from a man so powerful. But Alexander insisted that the real kindness had already been shown to him by a little girl who expected nothing in return. From that day on, everything changed. Lily ran through the mansion with bright eyes, filling the cold hallways with laughter. Clara held her head higher, her worry replaced with hope. And Alexander, who once believed his heart had turned to stone, felt pieces of it thaw each time he saw the girl who taught him what honesty truly looked like. Years later, Lily would grow to achieve things far beyond anyone's expectations, but Alexander never forgot the moment that changed his life. A moment not defined by wealth, or tests, or suspicion, but by a child's simple gesture of care. And sometimes, even now, he sits on that same velvet couch, running a finger over the paperweight she once used to hold $1 down, remembering the day he discovered that goodness still existed in the world. If this story touched your heart even a little, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your engagement truly helps bring more meaningful stories to life.